When I was a young child, I had this gorgeous box set of the Chronicles of Narnia series by C.S. Lewis, and the artwork was so beautiful to me that I never actually wound up reading any of them. I think I attempted reading The Magician's Nephew once, but I was really confused because it was my first foray into fantasy and I was too young to really get it. Years passed without my even touching them again due to the apprehension caused by my own confusion, and once I reached a certain age, I declared myself too old for kids stuff and looked on in complete disinterest as my mom gave them to my friend's younger sister. The movies didn't even spark my interest all that much. I mean, yeah, I liked The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe a lot, but I still didn't find myself inspired to read the book it was based on. I didn't watch any of these sequels or spin-offs either. As you can probably tell by now, I have a habit of putting stuff off until I can gain the maximum amount of pleasure possible from it. Call me a hedonist if you must, you wouldn't be wrong. On the topic of hedonism, I can't ignore the elephant in the room, or the lion in the room, I suppose. The Chronicles of Narnia is a series of Christian allegories, and that's no secret. Or if it was, now it's not. Sorry. While these allegories will be mentioned along with their corresponding stories in the Christian Bible, I am not in any way endorsing or otherwise agreeing with any religious doctrine. I myself am not religious. Even though I was raised in and confirmed by the United Methodist Church, I am personally not inclined to believe in a power any higher than the communities we as individuals serve. How very Wesleyan of me, huh? I'm not here to preach or convert anybody to anything. This is just a fun video in which the Christian Bible will be treated as mythos. If that offends you, that really sucks, but you'll probably find better luck with a different creator anyway. Whether lowercase or capital C, it doesn't really matter. So strap in, get a snack, perhaps partake in some burning bush, and experience the Chronicles of Narnia as I did, because it was a near religious experience. We're starting off our first little video in this series with The Magician's Nephew, which from the cover alone tells us that this will be related to the book of Genesis. I mean, hell, even the title itself gives that away. Magician, Genesis, the sounds are somewhat similar. I was hoping that the two words would somehow share etymologies, but alas, that didn't seem to be the case. Anyway, yeah, the cover. A man standing at the base of a tree, looking up into its branches, while the limbs bear clusters of nondescript pale fruits. The man is wearing a brown outfit that matches the color of the bark, which might indicate a certain oneness with the tree that reflects certain Christian beliefs that humans were created in their God's image. For those unfamiliar with the book of Genesis in the Christian Bible, it is widely believed that the first instance of sin is the act of eating a fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Listen, the Christian God was not super great at naming stuff, okay? In most English translations, this woman named Eve is tricked by God's arch nemesis Satan, who takes the form of a serpent and tells her to eat the fruit from this tree despite explicitly being told not to by the big man himself. She eats the fruit and she convinces Adam to eat it too, which is where a lot of bigots get this idea that women are inherently evil, seductive temptresses or something. To punish Eve and Adam for eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, God naturally grants them the knowledge of good and evil. Now the pair know what this concept of sin is and why it's wrong, and the first sin they notice is that they're naked and it makes them embarrassed. Oh, and also Eve gets to experience this incredible pain of childbirth now. Thanks, G. Women really get the short end of the stick in these Abrahamic religions. Anyway, knowing all this and looking back at the cover, it's not out of the realm of possibility to presume that the characters staring up at the fruits of the tree is perhaps a bit of foreshadowing that someone is looking for knowledge they know they aren't supposed to look for, and that they will end up paying heavily for it. Which kind of sounds exactly like the premise of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, but it's too many layers. Too many layers! Hopping into the book now, we're first introduced to Polly Plummer, a girl who lives in London. She's minding her own business in the backyard when a boy climbs over the garden wall, his face dirt and tear stained. When asked, he tells her his name is Diggory. Polly starts to give Diggory a bit of flack for crying, and as a boy no less, but he buzzes up with no issue. After all, who wouldn't cry after losing their comfortable life with a pony in the countryside and being forced to live in a big city with their aunt and crazy uncle while their father's away on business and their mother's dying? It's a bit dark right out the gate, but okay. And Polly agrees. She tries to turn the vibes around by bringing attention back to Diggory's crazy uncle. What makes him so crazy, you ask? Well, he has a study that Aunt Letty forbids Diggory from entering. She also interrupts conversations between uncle and nephew, and the conversation gets even remotely close to anything regarding, well, anything, which really sucks because, he tells Polly, he thought he heard a yell coming from the study one night as he passed by the door. From that moment, the two children are thick as thieves. They spend a lot of time indoors. This particular summer is cooler and more wet than normal. Polly finds a little secret space somewhere in the house. As always, I have such a terrible time picturing older architecture in my mind that I just wind up picturing an attic, even though I knew that that's not what it was. Regardless, she sets up a little hiding spot in a little nook tunnel thing somewhere in the house. She brings various trunks and chairs and some snacks so she can hide out in what she calls her smuggler's cave. One day they're sort of just chatting when Diggory wonders how far the tunnel goes. Polly tells him that it spans the row of houses on that little street. They realize they can get into other houses this way, and they decide that it would be a bright idea to check out the empty house on the other side of Diggory's since it's been uninhabited for ever. So they do some big-brained math to determine how many steps it'll take to get to the abandoned house since there are no windows in the crawl space attic tunnel. They take the predetermined number of steps and come upon a cupboard door which opens into a furnished attic. The walls are full of books. There's a big chair facing a fire and a table stacked high with tomes and other stuff. There's also a bright red tray with rings on it sectioned in pairs, one green and one yellow. And we get one of the most relatable quotes I've read in a long time. If Polly had been a very little younger, she would have wanted to put one in her mouth. I am Polly, and Polly is me. So Diggory is all freaked out by this and suggests they should leave. Polly inquires about the boy's take on those rings, almost tempting him like the Christian Bible claims Eve did to Adam. You know what? This is a little brilliant in a way, if not a bit on the nose. Before the fall, as Christians often call the first sin of eating the forbidden fruit, Eve and Adam were innocent. And what better representation of innocence is there other than a child? A lamb, perhaps? A fawn? I shouldn't get too ahead of myself. So, if you couldn't tell by this point, Polly is allegorically Eve and Diggory Adam. And who should catch them on the brink of sinning than God himself, or Uncle Andrew, that is. He stands from the chair, delighted to finally have some company. He shuts all three of them in the study with a wild grin by locking the doors to both the hallway and the outside tunnel. He offers a ring to Polly, and Uncle Andrew's supposed to be Satan, isn't he? Yeah, I think he's supposed to be Satan. Although, I did some quick searching on this because I swore there was some denomination of Christianity that believed God and Satan were the same deity, or somehow intrinsically the same, but I wasn't able to find anything directly confirming it. Most Christian doctrines believe that Satan is either a fallen angel or just an amalgamation of all things evil, but nevertheless, regardless of form, is considered God's adversary. Interestingly though, in Judaism, Satan isn't considered a rival, but rather an associate, subservient to Yahweh, and thus incapable of acting without his permission. But Judaism and Christianity aren't the same religion, so what does it matter? Well, C.S. Lewis, throughout his life, showed a significant amount of support for Jewish people. I had a hard time parsing if this meant the ethnicity or the religion or both, but I got major Zionist vibes reading through the C.S. Lewis Institute's website, which doesn't necessarily mean too terribly much, considering people can and will impart their own prejudices through a dead man's name, because what is he gonna do about it, right? It seems the man himself, though, was pretty apolitical publicly. However, he did openly disapprove of Hitler and his Holocaust of Jewish people in the 1930s and 1940s. For the record, I am anti-Zionist, anti-ethno-state, and anti-genocide. Free Palestine, free Sudan, free Congo. With all that being said, I thought it would be really interesting if we wound up seeing some kind of Jewish influence in Uncle Andrew through his being Satan as an agent of God versus an adversary. I thought it would be cool. Anyway, Uncle Andrew's urging Polly to take a ring. Diggory's telling her not to, but she does it anyway because Uncle Andrew's being so nice to her. And she's gone. Poofed out of existence. Diggory freaks out, and understandably so. He asks what in the world is going on, and Uncle Andrew answers in a way that only Uncle Andrew can. He starts by telling a story of his own godmother, a fairy godmother, he claims, who was so crazy that she was sent off to prison rather than an asylum, which I think is supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek observation about how asylums provided worse environments for women than a penitentiary, and I don't doubt the validity of that. Anyway, before she died, she was released from the asylum, and in her final days instructed a younger Uncle Andrew to retrieve a box from her bureau and destroy it upon her death. Well, she died, and he didn't keep his word. Diggory calls him rotten for this, and the old coot goes on about how he isn't, because naturally the rules of polite society don't apply to him as a white man. Rotten, said Uncle Andrew with a puzzled look. Oh, I see. You mean that little boys ought to keep their promises. Very true. Most right and proper, I'm sure, and I'm very glad you have been taught to do it. But of course you must understand that rules of that sort, however excellent they may be for little boys and servants and women, and even people in general, can't possibly be expected to apply to profound students and great thinkers and sages. No, Diggory. Men like me, who possess hidden wisdom, are freed from common rules just as we are cut off from common pleasures. Ours, my boy, is a high and lonely destiny. So, he's a Mormon. Got it. Uncle Andrew goes on about the box and what was in it. He claims the box itself was from a time and place more ancient and foreign than anyone could comprehend. It was from Atlantis. Inside, there was dust. Just dust, but dust from a whole different world and altogether foreign plane of existence. Source, trust me, bro. Uncle Andrew supposed that under the right conditions, the dust would simply return to whence it came, thus taking the bearer of it along, and that's how he made the rings. The yellow ones are supposed to take the wearer to this other world, the green ones are supposed to bring them back, only, Polly doesn't have a green ring, which means someone has to go after her, bringing a second ring along in order to bring it back. It can't be Uncle Andrew, though. Oh no. He's too important to potentially go missing or die or explode. Without him, the experiment would be nothing. So Diggory is sent to the Shadow Realm to rescue Polly. Okay, so before we continue, let's talk about dust for a second. I know what you're thinking. No way does dust somehow connect to the Christian Bible. Well, it kind of does, actually. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, we get this quote from the Christian God to Adam, laying out the mortal's punishment for eating the forbidden fruit. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. For those with little to no knowledge of the Christian Bible, it is said that Adam was created by God out of dirt or clay. And so this decree we get from God saying you'll return to where you came from is echoed in even this seemingly small detail of dust within the story. I'm not certain how intentional or unintentional it was, but even if it wasn't, it's really interesting to see how deeply Lewis's Christianity is woven into the fabric of his work. So yeah, Diggory is poofed off to this other world. He enters it by swimming out of a pool onto the floor of a lush green forest. The imagery of a child emerging into a new world through water, reflecting the concept of birth itself, is not lost on me. This place is some kind of verdant paradise with lots of green and lots of other pools of water around. I had no doubt that it was an allusion to the Garden of Eden, which, for those who are unfamiliar, is the place that the Christian God created for Eve and Adam and all his other creations to live in harmony and peace. There are lots of different interpretations and theories as to whether the Garden of Eden was actually real, and if so, where it exists today. Textually speaking, all signs point to the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East. The Christian Bible names the Tigris and Euphrates as some of the rivers originating in the Garden of Eden. That very area, historically and culturally speaking, is cited as the birthplace of civilization. It's no wonder why, considering access to fresh water and the fertile land surrounding it would make it an attractive choice for groups of people to settle down in. Some scholars blend the Christian Bible and modern scientific findings. The oldest modern human remains are found in Ethiopia, which is not terribly far from the Fertile Crescent anyway. Some translations of the Christian Bible even mention Ethiopia alongside the Garden of Eden, which could push some researchers to believe that the area was used as inspiration. Though truly without working knowledge of the original language this piece of the Christian Bible is written in, it's hard to say what's been changed and even lost through time. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here. Back to the good stuff. When Diggory arrives in the forest, he isn't entirely aware of who he is or why he's there. He finds Polly close by, half asleep at the base of a tree, but he doesn't recognize her fully. He knows that he knows her from somewhere, but he can't quite put his finger on it, and vice versa. The pair's memories are jogged when one of Uncle Andrew's experimental guinea pigs, yes, literal guinea pigs, marches by. They aren't in a terrible rush to get back though, as the forest is so pretty. So they do an experiment. They put on the green rings and jump back into the pool to see if it would take them home, and it very nearly does. However, they switch their rings again and swim out of the pool before they rematerialize in Uncle Andrew's lair. So now that they both know they can get home through that little puddle of water, they start trying the nearby pools to see if it won't take them to other worlds. Diggory and Polly slip on their green rings, mark the portal home so they don't get lost, and walk to a nearby pool of water before taking the plunge into it. Plunging into water, you say? Like a baptism, perhaps? On the other side, Polly and Diggory pop out in a courtyard of sorts, and it appears to be dark outside. However, among the tall and crumbling stone buildings around them, a kind of ambient red light illuminates the area, making the ruins themselves appear pink. This world is quiet, but not in the same way the woods was, or the world between worlds as they call it. Rather than the silence being warm and nurturing, it's oppressive here in this new place. The two children begin to explore a little bit, walking into the entrance of a dilapidated building and carefully traversing the long hallway until they come upon a second courtyard. This place looks structurally unsound at best. They exit the courtyard and begin to climb a staircase. They make their way through various other sprawling rooms that bleed into other sprawling rooms. Never do they find their way to the outside of whatever building this is. There are only ever more courtyards, devoid of all life, not even other bugs crawling around in the cracks between stones, not even moss or lichen or algae growing on anything, which is really weird. They eventually come upon a set of large gilded doors. Well, that's promising. Polly and Diggory decide to enter them, as one of the doors was left ajar anyway, and that's practically as clear of an invitation as one can get. Inside the doors is a gathering of people, frozen in time and dressed in the finest clothes and jewelry. Polly remarks that the clothing should have rotted away long ago. Diggory suggests that it's magic keeping everything in such good condition within the room. He can feel it, Mr. Krabs. They start inspecting the wax figure-like people and decide that they look like they were once nice. But as the kids make their way deeper into the room, the faces become less nice. Downright cruel, even. Nasty and evil, until they come upon the final body, a woman dressed in the nicest clothes of them all and the most tall and gorgeous to boot. This is naturally a very curious sight, and Diggory suggests taking a closer look at a nearby structure to figure it out. It's a small pedestal of sorts with an arch and a golden bell dangling from its apex. Beside it lies a hammer. Polly notices an inscription on the pillar. It reads, "Make your choice, adventurous stranger. Strike the bell and bide the danger, or wonder till it drives you mad what would have followed if you had." All right, so, don't hit the bell. Easy. And Polly, the little genius she is, agrees with me. But Diggory, of course, has to feel somehow uncomfortable with the unknown. How can he be expected to function now that he'll have to spend the rest of his life wondering about what would have happened if they'd only rung the bell? Polly challenges him, asking what does it matter, basically, and Diggory turns sexist by saying that of course a girl wouldn't understand his mental turmoil because girls only care about stupid things or whatever. They get into it with some name calling. Polly decides she's totally over this and goes to retrieve her green ring from her pocket. Diggory grabs her wrist to stop her in a panic. Did I say green? Please hold. They get into it with some name calling. Polly decides she's totally over this and goes to retrieve her yellow ring from her pocket. Diggory grabs her wrist to stop her in a panic, and without thinking, he picks up the hammer with his free hand and chimes the bell. The bell lets out a pretty ring that soon turns very icky and loud. So loud that the ground shakes and a part of the roof just collapses. Until it stops. So glad that's over. Except it's not. A woman, dressed in the nicest clothes of them all, and the most tall and gorgeous to boot, rises from her seat. She approaches the children, asking who'd awakened her, and Diggory answers, of course. She assumes that he's some kind of magician, but noting that the young boy has no mark of royal blood, remarks he can't be a real magician. How disappointing. The woman, Jadis, the Queen of Charn, informs Polly and Diggory that they must leave the building as it will begin collapsing now that the spell is broken. She whisks them through the halls every so often, noting which doors go where until they reach the exit. Jadis reaches out a hand, which causes the heavy metal doors to crumple like a fine silken fabric. She makes sure to impart some kind knowledge on the kids. Remember what you have seen. This is what happens to things and to people who stand in my way. The three of them step out onto a balcony and they look out over the ruins illuminated by a cold red sun. Here we learn more about this world and why all of this has happened. Jadis has or had a sister. We don't get context about what caused the war itself, but the two siblings fought terribly. Apparently there was a mutual understood rule that neither side would use magic, but the sister wound up breaking this rule and Queen Jadis went nuclear. With the utterance of a single word, she destroyed absolutely everything and everyone but herself. It was the final F you after her sister had killed all of her soldiers. But what about her subjects? Well, what about them? Diggory asks an innocuous question with serious consequences. Is this deplorable word you used the reason for the sun being so red? Well, no. Queen Jadis says it's always been that way. Diggory explains that the sun for their world is smaller, more yellow, and warmer, and Jadis likes this a lot. She tells them to take her to their leader, basically, and after Polly makes a sassy comment, the queen grabs her by the hair, thus freeing the two children to slip their hands into their pockets and touch the yellow rings to take them back to Eden. Okay, I know that Jadis is supposed to be like Satan, and I know Charn is supposed to be hell or purgatory or something, but I can't help but see a little bit of Mr. God in her. There are a lot of religions and mythologies with a flood story. Christianity is no different. Genesis chapters 6 through 9 details the story of how the Christian God flooded the earth to punish everyone for being unforgivably sinful, which is hilarious if you take the crucifixion of Christ into account, but that'll come up in a later book. Father God tells this guy Noah about his plans to kill fucking everyone and instructs him to build a huge ark to house his family and also 2 of each animal so that they can repopulate the world when it's all over. I can't remember how long they're in that boat. I feel like 40 days and 40 nights is significant, but I can't remember off the top of my head if it's about the flood. Regardless, Noah sends out some birds to see if any vegetation is around, signaling land availability. A dove comes back with an olive branch, which is where we get that imagery in modern media. Now that the world is cleansed of sin, everything is pure like a dove and peaceful like an olive branch. I don't know. I didn't write this shit. So everyone exits the vehicle and makes a sacrifice, and God pinky promises not to destroy the world ever again, using a rainbow as a kind of notary stamp or something to legitimize his promise. Now, I am keenly aware that Jadis hasn't promised anything of the sort, which is where my interpretation falls flat. But my point remains the same. Queen Jadis is willing to end everyone and everything to prove a point and protect herself. And is that not what the Christian God was doing with that whole flood? I mean, shit, there are a few denominations that portray God as fire and brimstone, unforgiving, angry, and terrible guy. Queen Jadis isn't far off from that. She sees her subjects as her subjects. They are to follow her unquestioningly by virtue of simply being under her rule. Listen, I'm not gonna throw any one denomination under the bus, but I'm sure we all have a couple in mind right now. I do also appreciate this conflict between sisters as a metaphor for the conflict between God and Satan, good and bad. Choosing to make them sisters had to be intentional by C.S. Lewis because it demonstrates how inextricably linked the two are. Good cannot exist without bad, because if there's neither one nor the other, how do we have the capability to define either of them? And now we're bleeding into Taoist philosophy, so before it gets too convoluted, let's get back to the book, shall we? Polly and Diggory touch their yellow rings to poof back to the lush forest realm, and everything is all right. They go home and live happily ever after. Just kidding! Because Jadis is touching Polly at the time of transmission, the Witch Queen Lady poofs back with them. It seems there's a kind of transitive property of magic in this world C.S. Lewis built. She doesn't look very well, as she had in Charn. She trembles and pants for air as if she can't get a good breath in. This, of course, makes her way less intimidating to the 2 kids. Polly urges Diggory to hurry up and get back to London with her, and Diggory feels a little bad about it. Jadis pleads weakly for mercy, but Polly insists on showing her the same amount of compassion she showed her subjects, which is none. The children slip their green rings on and plunge into the puddle marked for home, and everything is all right. They go home and live happily ever after. Just kidding! Jadis jumps in after them and grabs poor Diggory by the ear. Then all 3 arrive in front of Uncle Andrew, who is fascinated by this large woman accompanying the 2 minors. Polly and Diggory note just how similar Uncle Andrew and Queen Jadis look, although Uncle Andrew lacks a certain degree of cruelty that the Queen wears boldly. So they're mirrors of one another, basically. Jadis demands to meet the magician who brought her to this world. Uncle Andrew sheepishly reveals it's him. Jadis is skeptical, naturally. He doesn't have royal blood after all. She tells him he's not a real magician, that he's only learned it through books and would have been killed in Charn, but that she will allow him to be her servant. For now. How benevolent of her. She commands him to fetch her a vehicle so she can begin conquering the world, whichever one royalty uses, citing a magic carpet or a tamed dragon as an example, for the record, post haste. If he fails to comply, she says she will curse him to basically be uncomfortable forever. Uncle Andrew resigns himself to his station and goes to do that. Now with a new minion to use, the children are of no use to her, and she acts as if they aren't even there. She'd behaved the same way towards Polly in Charn because she wasn't the one with magical abilities. Jadis grows impatient and stalks out of the attic after Uncle Andrew to see what the holdup is. Polly says it's time for her to go home, and Diggory begs her to come back tomorrow. He's scared, understandably so, and worried that the sight of Jadis will push his sick mother into the bright light at the end of the tunnel. Polly agrees, but only after she makes him apologize for grabbing her, ringing the bell, and letting Jadis come into their world from the woods. While this is happening, Uncle Andrew goes to his room and grabs his secret wine from his wardrobe. After a couple of glasses, he begins dressing in his finest clothes, and in in that span of time, his dread has morphed into lust. Could Lewis have been warning against the evils of alcohol here, perhaps? I looked into this actually, and Lewis didn't seem to be straight edge like I'd expected. Rather, he advocated for moderation in all things and suggested that one should only refrain if they had a problem. Nice. Before leaving to catch a cab, Uncle Andrew approaches his sister, Aunt Letty, to ask for money, which she refuses him because he's bad with money. She had been richer before he moved in with her. Uncle Andrew's trying to explain that no, he really does need the money because a distinguished guest has arrived. Aunt Letty seriously doubts this. And that's when Queen Jadis marches into the room in all of her glorious and intimidating beauty. Now, Aunt Letty is not having this. She tells Jadis to leave, going so far as to call her a hussy because of her bare arms. Listen, if this was the US, she would have a right to them. Okay. Janice holds out her arm much like she did to that poor door earlier in Charn, but thankfully she's more or less powerless here in this realm. She's still unnaturally strong though, and so she picks up Aunt Letty and throws her across the room before barging out, commanding Uncle Andrew to accompany her. Aunt Letty's more or less fine after she comes to with the help of some smelling salts. She instructs a maid to bring Diggory's mother her lunch. After a quick lunch himself, Diggory starts trying to concoct a plan to get Jadis out of here. He can't very well go out on the town to track her down. He's only got tuppence anyway, and Aunt Letty isn't about to give him any more money than that, so he sits down in the front room and stares out the window, waiting for the Queen to return with his uncle. Something interesting happens while Diggory's waiting for Jadis and Uncle Andrew. A grape seller comes to the house, and from the dining room, the young boy can hear the conversation between her and Aunt Letty. His aunt believes the grapes will be delightful for his dying mother, but remarks that it probably won't do much good. She says, quote, "I'm afraid it would need fruit from the land of youth to help her now. Nothing in this world will do much." And there it is. The pretext for stealing the forbidden fruit. Situations like this always feel unbelievably cruel to me. I know that's the point and all, but there's something about the desperation to keep someone you love around forever that kind of makes me tear up a little bit. It's mostly because the amount of love it takes to want to do that is astounding, and I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. But also there's that innate understanding that it won't do any good. We're mortal, after all. We all die eventually, and it's a shame that we do. As much as I wish we could be shielded from grief, I understand it's a part of life, and it still sucks. A light bulb goes off in his head, though, because he realizes that even though Aunt Letty is speaking figuratively, a place like she described might actually exist. But as he's reaching into his pocket for the yellow ring, Jadis returns in all her chaotic glory. Turns out, after robbing some people of their jewelry, coin, and horse and buggy, she's led the whole town on a wild chase back to the house. She crashes the buggy with Uncle Andrew inside while taking a sharp turn, and the horse goes bananas. She climbs on it while some policemen apprehend the uncle to basically ask him what the fuck is going on. The owner, or cabbie, of the horse informs everyone that that gorgeous beast can be quite deadly, so he has to be the one to try and approach it to calm it down. It's a mess. A right mess, I say. And all the while, Diggory is trying to find an opening so he can poof both her and himself off to the wood between worlds. Jadis commands everyone to back off. "Dog!" came her cold, clear voice, ringing loud above all the other noises. "Dog, unhand our royal charger. We are the Empress Jadis." This intimidates absolutely no one, and the whole crowd starts laughing at her. She bows her head in complete embarrassment for a moment before snapping off the crossbar of an iron lamppost and using it as a weapon, crashing it down over people's heads and knocking them out, if not outright killing them. Polly appears at Diggory's side, and the two work together to kidnap Jadis and take her back to where she belongs. The crowd starts booing and throwing rocks at her like this is some kind of entertainment, which may or may not be a snide criticism of the general British populace by C.S. Lewis. I don't want to say that I see ye old average Brit as someone simple-minded, but I do want to say that I think that that's what he thought because it's funny. Diggory catches Jadis's heel, but she kicks him off her a few times. When he finally manages to hold fast, he shouts for Polly to touch the ring. Then they're all transported to the woods once again, only this time Uncle Andrew's here too. And the horse, naturally, but also his cabbie. What an interesting band of buds, eh? Jadis immediately feels terrible upon re-entering Eden and weakly leans into the horse's neck. The horse feels great, though, and walks over to a pool to start drinking some crisp water. Somehow, the horse drags everyone along into this other puddle, so when the kids grab their green rings, they all go down together into nothing. No, literally nothing. Capital N, nothing. An empty world devoid of light and anything else. While Jadis despairs that her ruin has come, Uncle Andrew whines that he needs a stiff drink. The horse's cabbie encourages everyone to join in a bright, festive hymn about, like, harvests or something. And this is gonna be like the creation story, isn't it? While this is happening, Uncle Andrew pulls Diggory aside and tells him to slip on his yellow ring so they can leave. Jadis hears this and rebukes Uncle Andrew terribly for even thinking about leaving her behind. And Diggory joins in. How dare he suggest leaving Polly and everyone else? Uncle Andrew's kind of a little bitch. Well, anyway, the group starts bickering, but the cabbie tells them to shut up and listen to something. Singing. Distant singing, sweet and low. Stars appear instantly, all at once after a while. More harmonizing voices join in on the song as if they belonged to the twinkles in the sky themselves. Okay, yeah, it's the creation story. Bear with me, I'll explain it in a little bit for those who aren't familiar. It seems straightforward, but I don't want to leave anyone behind by assuming we all know anything about the Christian Bible and the stories it tells. It wouldn't be right from even a communications perspective. Anyway, C.S. Lewis's faith can no longer be in question here because the cabbie himself says, "Glory be! I'd have been a better man all my life if I'd known there were things like this." And isn't that just every Christian's dream? Like, that's one of the main things they operate on. If you're a good person, you get to go to heaven when you die. This utopian place in the sky with angels and peace and love and no struggle. The singing voice grows louder and the horizon lightens to reveal hills in the distance while a gentle wind blows. Still, the singing crescendos as the sun itself rises and illuminates the world around them. The light of day also reveals a lion. He faces the rising sun while singing his little song of creation. Jadis and Uncle Andrew hate this music. They hate this world. The uncle suggests shooting the animal and implores Diggory to take him home so he can retrieve a gun. Jesus, this guy is desperate. Diggory, of course, refuses and threatens to leave everyone there while he and Polly return home if they don't stop their nonsense. This is exhausting, honestly, but it's a kid's book, so it's supposed to have a lot going on. Otherwise, the children will get bored, so I can't really fault it for that. But I was getting kind of tired of the book at this point. So the lion changes his little tune and starts walking around. Grass and shit springs up from the ground and everything. Cool. Some trees. During this, Uncle Andrew and Queen Jadis have words. The cabbie tells them to shut up, yada yada. The lion continues singing, and as he does so, he begins approaching the group. Jadis throws her iron crossbar at him, and it lands square between the poor animal's eyes, but he isn't fazed. I mean, God can't be fazed after all, because according to a lot of Christians, their God knows everything that has happened and will happen. Plus, like, even in other religions, what deity can be harmed by some mortal? Let's ignore Greek mythology, though. Yeah? Greek mythology is usually the exception in, like, all of this. Flowers and rivers and springs crop up as the lion continues singing. Now, one of the things that kind of differs from the creation of this place and the creation of the world in the Christian Bible is that a lamppost is next to come to life, right in the spot where that crossbar had landed. A lamppost, you say? Yep, it is that lamppost. If you know, you know. If you don't, it'll come up again in the next book. I pinky promise. And actually, I have a little picture of this real-life lamppost it was based on just outside the University Church of St. Mary the Virgin on Oxford's campus. Isn't it cute? Uncle Andrew is kind of just babbling to himself about the commercial potential of this place that can grow inorganic things for free, arguably challenging Satan's inherent evilness just by being a capitalist piece of shit, but that's just me. When he mentions aloud how young he feels. "I shouldn't be surprised if I never grew a day older in this country. Stupendous, the land of youth." This sets off a light bulb in Diggory's head. He follows the lion to, I guess, ask him about saving his mom or something. But he's still singing, and what should happen next but a bunch of other animals sprouting from the ground. Cute. The lion walks through these innumerous fauna and I guess chooses two of each species to come follow him. The flood story, if not reflected in Charon through the destruction of everything, is definitely shown here, for obvious reasons. And when they all gather in a circle around the lion, everything is finally silent. Even Uncle Andrew. Then the lion speaks. "Narnia, Narnia, Narnia, awake, love, think, speak, be walking trees, be talking beasts, be divine waters." All right. So, the creation story. The very first chapter of Genesis in the Christian Bible explains how the world came to be. Ever heard someone say, "Let there be light"? Yeah, that's this story. Basically, the Christian God says, hey, let there be X or Y, and that's what happens. Birds of the air, fish of the sea, all life on earth, all of that, per the Bible, is set in place by the man upstairs in 7 days. This is where we get Big Bang deniers, or creationists, as they're called. These are the types who don't believe in evolution, who believe that dinosaurs are either a hoax or that human beings, Homo sapiens, lived side by side. However, there are some denominations that once again blend their stories with modern science, claiming that faith and worldly knowledge are not mutually exclusive. Those who believe this are those who say that no, this didn't happen over the course of 7 days as we know them, but rather 7 days in God's eyes. Because this dude is presented as some kind of timeless being who existed before the earth did. A day to him could be eons longer than a day to humans. These people are also inclined to believe that since their God's days are so long comparatively, the theory of evolution is sound within their faith. Perhaps in the time it took to create all the animals and plants, this God was taking his time and molding everything to be perfect, fine-tuning them to be just as they are today. And who's to say that the Big Bang isn't the initial words spoken by their God, let there be light? At least that's their take on it. But who knows? I'm just reporting what I know through research and experience, though I will say that the more secular interpretation is kind of nice after being surrounded by overzealous nut jobs my entire life. So Aslan the lion says his little lines, and people start sprouting up from the forest to join the little gathering of chosen animals. And I'm talking like gods and goddesses and like dwarves and stuff, all the mythological humanoids you can think of. He tells them, quote, creatures, I give you yourselves. I give to you forever this land of Narnia. I give you the woods, the fruits, the rivers. I give you the stars, and I give you myself. The dumb beast whom I have not chosen are yours also. Treat them gently and cherish them, but do not go back to their ways, lest you cease to be talking beasts. For out of them you were taken, and into them you will return. Again, we're back to the dust allegory. See? I told you it was relevant. I don't need to recount the concept for any of you to understand the literary parallels, right? If you need a refresher, go back a little bit and listen again to the biblical excerpt. You'll see what I mean. Aslan tells everyone they needn't be so grave and that they can be silly, goofy things. Some bird, I think, makes a bit of a fool of himself, thus becoming the first joke. Aslan then asks for counsel with a few different beings because an evil has entered their lands. Namely, he invites the chief dwarf, the river god, the oak, like the tree, the he-owl, both ravens, and the bull elephant. They all party up and go off to have a little secret meeting. Diggory really needs to talk to Aslan, though, about his mom. He and Polly and the horse, Strawberry is the horse's name, by the way, I don't think I mentioned that, and the cabbie all go off to follow after him. Meanwhile, Uncle Andrew's hiding behind a tree off in the distance somewhere, scared out of his mind. All the talking creatures, now left to their own devices, approach the man because he's just so weird. But from Uncle Andrew's perspective, they're there to eat him. Because, as Lewis writes, quote, the trouble about trying to make yourself stupider than you really are is that you very often succeed. And no truer words have been spoken. Uncle Andrew had witnessed the same exact thing the kids did. This isn't some situation where only the young and innocent can witness the magic of Narnia. He just freaked himself out or something and thus willingly closed his eyes and ears to the reality of what was happening right in front of him. The animals only approached him because they were curious and wanted to learn more about him. He took it as a threat, though. You know, one of my favorite things about kids' books is just how universal the lessons in them are. I mean, it's not hard in the slightest to imagine an adult so confused and challenged by the reality they face that all they see is what they choose to see. And it isn't a mistake that what they choose to see makes them, well, a victim. Too mean? Ah, well, let's move on. Uncle Andrew's scared out of his wits and faints. The animals that had approached him spend the next little while debating if that makes him a tree or if he's some different kind of animal. It's a fun and whimsical interaction. It kind of breaches into some minor philosophical territory. I'm not sure what school of thought or what philosopher it originated from, but it's the whole concept of if a human is a featherless biped, then this plucked chicken is a human. After a few pages of funny little suppositions, they decide he's a tree and must be planted. Fortunately for Uncle Andrew, they plant him right side up. Unfortunately for Uncle Andrew, the lady elephant decides he needs to be watered and, well, waters him. During all this, Diggory and the rest of the crew, we have no idea where Jadis has gone, by the way. approach Aslan. The young boy comes face to face with him and asks if he can have some of the magical healing fruit from Narnia for his ailing mother. The lion doesn't say yes or no. Rather, he commands Diggory to tell him how the witch got there. And Diggory explains. Every time he tries to lie or spin the truth a little, Aslan calls him on it, and eventually the whole story has been re-explained. As is the standard for children's books, what if they forgot about what's happened in the past 150 pages, you know? Once he's caught up to speed, which really can an omniscient or all-knowing being really be caught up to speed, he says something extremely prophetic. Quote, "You see, friends, that before the new clean world I gave you is 7 hours old, a force of evil has already entered it, waked and brought hither by this son of Adam. But do not be cast down. Evil will come of that evil, but it is a long way off, and I will see to it that the worst falls upon myself. And as Adam's race has done the harm, Adam's race shall help to heal it." Okay, so a few significant things are imparted to the reader through this. Firstly, the number 7. 7 is a big deal in Christianity because according to the Bible, the world was created in 7 days. Well, really it was 6, but on the 7th day, God rested, which is where we get this notion of the Sabbath. Different denominations have their own days of rest, but most of the time that day is Sunday. Regardless, 7 is a number that symbolizes completion, perfection, God's divine will, etc. Secondly, Aslan is Jesus. Now, Jesus isn't explicitly mentioned in Genesis. The story of Jesus is actually in the New Testament, or like the second half of the Christian Bible, more or less. The Cliff Notes version is that Jesus is the Son of God conceived by a virgin named Mary. He ultimately goes on to be crucified at the hands of the Romans as the ultimate sacrifice for humanity's sins. Thirdly, Aslan is not only Jesus, but also God, perhaps the entire Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity is honestly pretty intermediate level Christianity. It's not terribly hard to understand, but it can take a little while to like fully comprehend it. So I'll try to do it some justice. If you've ever heard about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, or Holy Ghost, those are usually interchangeable, then you have heard about the Holy Trinity. It's this concept that the Christian God takes multiple forms, and these forms aren't the same thing, but perhaps like different representations of capital H him. The only example I can even think of is like squares and rectangles. Like, yes, they're the same one way, but the other way it doesn't work. For example, a square by definition is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not always a square. It's complicated, sort of, but not really, but also, yeah. When I went through confirmation when I was like 10 or 12, I had this concept practically drilled into my brain, but over a decade later, I can't remember all the nitty-gritty, honestly. There are a bunch of diagrams that all kind of explain the Holy Trinity in more and more detail. Some of them start to look a lot like Celtic knots, which is kind of fun from an anthropological perspective, I guess. But yeah. In a few sentences, C.S. Lewis more or less drops a bomb of Christian lore onto the readers. And I mean, for those of us who are raised in this stuff, it's like not that big of a deal, but through the lens of someone who knows nothing about Christianity, I'm so sorry. It's almost like walking into a meeting about a huge merger on your first day at the job or something. Anyway, Aslan talks to the cabbie a bit and asks if he likes it in Narnia, if he'd stay if given the chance. The cabbie says yes, except he wishes his wife could be there. Aslan lets out a roar and poofs the guy's wife to Narnia just like that. They're crowned the king and queen of Narnia and tasked with looking over all the goings on of the land. They are yet another iteration of Adam and Eve. I suppose at this point, Polly and Diggory aren't Adam and Eve proper, but they're descendants. But that starts bordering on pedantry, and I'd really like to move on. Regardless of whether the kids are Eve and Adam or their children, the result is the same. The vibes are the same, more or less. All right, so Aslan's talking to Diggory now, and he asks the boy if he's ready to right his wrongs in bringing the witch to Narnia. The little boy can't help himself and begs the lion to help his mother. Aslan sort of just brushes it off, basically. He kind of just goes, yeah, I know it sucks, but I have to protect Narnia, so go fetch me an apple from this one specific tree in a far-off place. And Diggory agrees, but he notes it's going to take him a while. So what does Aslan do? He gives Strawberry wings, or Fledge. The horse's name is now Fledge, or is he a Pegasus now? I don't know anymore. Whatever, just go with it. Okay, we've only got 40 pages left. Diggory and Polly climb on Fledge's back and off they go in search of this really cool apple tree. Time passes, and despite having the gift of flight, they can't easily find this place Aslan told them to look for. The kids are hungry now, but they don't have anything to eat, and they have this exchange with Fledge that is just like prayer propaganda, I guess. It's kind of funny. Well, I do think someone might have arranged about our meals, said Diggory. I'm sure Aslan would have if you'd asked him, said Fledge. Wouldn't he know without being asked? asked, said Polly. I've no doubt he would, said the horse, still with his mouth full, but I've a sort of idea he likes to be asked. Don't forget to say your prayers, children. Polly remembers she has some toffees in her pocket, and being sure not to touch the ring, fishes them out. The two kiddos split them evenly and bury the odd one in the hopes that it'll grow into a toffee tree as the iron bar had blossomed into a proper lamppost. After their, dinner, Fledge and the kids lay down to sleep. At some point in the night, something wakes Polly up. Diggory and Fledge hear it too, whatever it is, but they can't find whatever's making the nondescript noise, so they all settle back down and sleep till dawn. This video is just like a progression of my getting sick, and I'm noticing that as I'm watching all of this back and fine-tuning some of these edits. I forgot to mention at this point that I was mistaken thinking that the wood between worlds was Eden. I was going off of the cover, and my interpretation of the cover was that this green verdant paradise on, you know, in this art was in the wood between worlds, but it's actually in Eden. Like, this is what the kids are about to go and find, thus making Narnia Eden instead. I feel like that may be implied throughout the course of the video, but I wanted to make it like very explicitly clear that Eden is not the place with the trees and the pools of water. It is Narnia. Narnia is Eden. And perhaps heaven, maybe. I haven't read any of these books, so that may be the case later on, but we'll see. So I have COVID. Stop going places when you're feeling sick, people, okay? Because this is so not cool. Anyway, I have a self-imposed deadline, so I'm gonna try and finish this off as best as I can. I'm not expecting people to sit through all of this, but I'm gonna finish this up. Okay, so I can get it out on time. Come dawn, Polly wakes everyone up with an announcement. A toffee tree has sprouted after all. After bathing in a nearby river, the dynamic trio have some toffee fruit breakfast and head off for that elusive apple tree. They find it exactly where Aslan said it would be, on a hill, in a valley, by a lake. Only the top of the hill, where all the trees are, is sectioned off by a high fence. This intimidates Polly and Fledge, leaving Diggory to continue his quest alone. He approaches the gates, and an inscription on them reads, "Come in by the gold gate, or not at all. Take of my fruit for others or forbear. For those who steal or those who climb my wall shall find their heart's desire and find despair." Diggory can't be asked to discern anything from the poem other than take of my fruit for others, which is what he's doing, or so he tells himself. So he touches the gate and it swings open for him. As good an invitation as any, am I right? He finds the tree he's looking for almost intuitively. After plucking an apple from one of its branches and slipping it into his coat pocket, Diggory makes the mistake of giving it a good smell. And as he does so, an intense desire washes over him. At this point, he starts bargaining with himself. Would it really be that bad if he took another apple? He's already taken one for someone else, technically. And can a poem really be considered a set of rules? Maybe it's just a suggestion. His small lapse in judgment is cut short when he notices a bird in the tree. I suppose the shock is enough to pull him to reality, as much of a reality as a fictional place can be, I guess. And he starts walking back out the gates. But on the way out, he notices that he has a visitor. It seems the witch Jadis had followed him in, or climbed the side of the wall, who knows, and snatched up an apple for herself. She looks stronger and healthier now in everything except complexion. She's pale as frost, white as snow. Diggory runs out of the garden and Jadis gives chase, all the while trying to convince him to use the fruit for his own ends. Eat it for yourself so you can live forever, or take it directly to your mom so she can get better. Don't bring it to Aslan. That type of thing. But Diggory digs his heels in and declines before urging Fledge to head east back to Narnia. When he gives the apple to Aslan, the lion just kind of tells him he did a good job and instructs him to throw the apple toward a nearby riverbank. And then it's time for the coronation of the king and queen of Narnia, the cabbie guy, Frank, and his wife, Helen. Weird pivot there, but all right. And there's an even weirder pivot directly after that. So apparently while all the mess with the apple tree was going on, the animals were trying to figure out what Uncle Andrew was and what he needed. After the guy had dug himself out of the ground and tried to run away, the animals put him in a sort of enclosure of twisted brambles and tried feeding him various things that he obviously didn't want to eat as a human man. Aslan asks for Uncle Andrew to be brought to him,
And when presented with the wretch, Polly asks the lion to say something to calm him and prevent him from returning to Narnia. She tells him about the uncle's plans to abuse the generative nature of the lands. Aslan laughs this off basically and tells the little girl that the lamppost only grew because of the residual power from his song earlier. It won't last. Aslan commands Uncle Andrew to go to sleep, and he does. The coronation continues, and the dwarves make crowns for the king and queen. Right as Aslan says his little ceremonial lines, a large tree sprouts up from where Diggory's apple landed earlier. And Aslan makes a proclamation about how, so long as the tree stands strong, no harm will come to Narnia. Then he tells Diggory to take a fruit from his new tree and take it to his mother so she can get better. Aslan sees the kids off himself. Oh, and Uncle Andrew too. He's still asleep. Aslan shows the kiddos the spot where the pool to Charn once was, but is no longer, basically warning them that what is done can't be undone and stuff like that. He warns against tyrannical leaders of the mortal world, and I'd try to link it to World War I or something, but I'm sick and just want to get this over with, honestly. Then, after giving this vague warning, he commands Polly and Diggory to bury Uncle Andrew's rings so no one can mess with them ever again, and then he sends them off. The three hooligans land on Uncle Andrew's doorstep, and it's like no time has passed at all. To anyone who's seen the movie, this isn't a shock. The crowd outside is still tending to the cop who'd been bonked on the head and everything. Uncle Andrew sets off straight for his room for a bath and some brandy. Polly takes care of the rings. And Diggory tends to his mother. He feeds her the apple and then buries the core in the backyard. The next day, his mom's doing a lot better. The physician calls the case practically a miracle. Later on, he meets up with Polly, who's still in possession of the rings. They bury them in the same spot as the apple core, marked by a small sapling already. Time passes, the mom gets better, and Diggory's dad comes into some serious cash with the passing of his great uncle. Polly visits the family's new estate once a year. The tree in Diggory's aunt's backyard grows strong and well, but it doesn't produce magical fruit. Simply really good fruit. There's still a connection to its sibling in Narnia way deep down, and when it falls over someday in the future, Diggory turns it into a wardrobe. I think we know where that's gonna go. Narnia flourishes with the beasts and god nymphs and the king and queen's progeny. The lamppost stays where it is, lit day and night, even until another little girl enters Narnia one day and finds it many years later, and that's where the second book will pick up. More or less. And that's The Magician's Nephew. I enjoyed it. I really did. Even though I got sick and lost some steam in the latter half, it was still super fun to analyze the story and connect it to Christian mythology. I kind of shocked myself by how much information I retained over the course of all these years. I feel kind of weird giving this book a rating since it's directed toward children and I'm very obviously not a child, but if I had to, I guess I'd put it at a 3.5 out of 5. I could easily see myself reaching for this book again if I want something quick, easy, and low stakes. I mean, this can be read in a day or two tops, if you're not thinking too hard about it like I am. So, what did you think? Did you read this as a kid? And if you did, were you able to catch on to the religious themes? Does this story have the same kind of parallels in your religion? I'm interested. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because this took a lot of time, and that kind of rhymed. Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you next time, and I'll hopefully be a lot more healthy.